Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we are here to get you set for Saturday night in the Hammer, where the Argos take on the winless Hamilton Tiger Cats. We got a lot to talk about today. It's our first opportunity to address Bill Manning parting ways with the Toronto Argonauts. We're also going to talk about two signings the Argos made, Baptiste Poirier and Woody Barron, which was a little bit of a surprise. Former Argos coach Chris Jones was fired in Edmonton. We'll address that. Plus, Winon McManis is on fire as of late, and he was PFF's top player in the CFL this week. We'll get into that too. And pick six this week comes from Gary McConnell. He's got a great question about ratio and roster designation, so we'll break all that down for you. Plus, we've got our game preview, our injury report, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and our CFL picks. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. All right, I want you to put it in your calendar right now. Not this weekend, next weekend. The home game, finally, after 3 weeks away, the home game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Saturday night, it's at 7 o'clock. I want you to put in your calendar that you are going to go down to Something in the Water Brewing and join me. You can have a beverage, you can sit out on the patio. Hopefully it'll be a gorgeous day. We've had bad luck so far on game days this year, but after a 3-week hiatus, we'll be back at Something in the Water for pregame. And so make sure you get down there to join me. You can grab a Longboat Pale Ale. There's so many great beers to choose from. They've got excellent food as well. It's a perfect place to go pregame. Something in the Water is only steps from BMO Field, steps from Lamport Stadium too, where the Argos practice. And if it's a beautiful Saturday, which I have fingers crossed, we're due for one, it's the perfect place to start your Argos tailgate at Something in the Water and then head on down to BMO Field for the game. So hope to see you there. Mark it in your calendars next Saturday for Winnipeg and Toronto. Okay, JB, let's get into this schedule. Let's talk about this Bill Manning parting ways with the Toronto Argonauts. So Bill Manning, president or former president of the Toronto Argonauts and TFC, has left Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And from the Argos standpoint, we're not really going to address the TFC side. Obviously, that's not our wheelhouse. But from the Argos standpoint, Pinball Clemens moves into that spot in an interim basis, and he's kind of, I guess, going to do both jobs, but he'll be reporting directly to newish president and CEO Keith Pelly. What do you make of this move, JB? How do you see this affecting the Argos going forward?
I don't know how much impact he had on the Argos. My sense from the outside that he was more TFC connected. And so I think it's really maybe more reflection on the dumpster fire that TFC have turned into this year, and some changes in direction there. I don't think he. I mean, I don't know, but it didn't seem like he was that connected to the Argos.
It didn't seem like that to me, certainly. And I know I've talked to a number of Argos fans over the last couple of weeks that didn't even know that Bill Manning was the president of the Toronto Argonauts. And that sort of surprised me because I don't know that that's a very common thing. And again, nothing against Bill Manning. I don't know what the structure of that was like and what his commitments were like and how that's all structured for MLSE. But yeah, to have fans not necessarily know who the president of the Argos was, I don't think is indicative to someone who's doing a lot of day-to-day work in the organization. I do think, pinball is very visible. Obviously, everybody in Toronto, Argos fan or not, knows who Pinball Clemens is, and he's very visible. Him in that role, I could see that sticking, but I don't want him to drift too far away from the job that he's been doing so wonderfully since 2019 when he came in at the end of that season. So that's the only concern I see from an Argos standpoint is Pinball would be great reporting directly to Keith Pelly, who has experience himself in that role. That sounds like a great plan. However, let's, as an Argos organization, make sure pinball's not being taken out of what he's been so good at over the last few years. But I think having a president who can be more visible is important. And I really think keeping those two roles apart. Like, he was president of both the Argos and TFC. I'm not sure that works that well together. So I wouldn't mind him, whoever it is, that whether it's Pinball that stays on or whether someone else is brought in, I think I'd prefer it if they just stayed on the Argos side. And I think most Argos fans would echo that sentiment. Two signings this week, JB. Woody Barron, Baptiste Pollier. Baptiste Pollier is a global defensive lineman. There's not too much on him. I don't know if we're going to see him on the field anytime soon. To me, this is sort of kicking the tires, bring a guy in. Let's take another look. Let's see what this guy's all about. And if there is a situation, again, the Argos are in a great spot right now with their global players. But if there was a situation, is this a guy that the club could turn to? I think that's sort of how they're looking at the Baptiste Pollier signing. Woody Barron, though, that is a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Woody Barron signing is huge. I know sometimes you get a bit used to just, another week, another signing, and you get the email and, there's a little report about it. But the Woody Barron signing is incredible. He was an all-star last year. He is a tremendous interior defensive lineman who essentially was cut from BC because they didn't want to pay him the bonus, and they had, built up their depth on the defensive line, and he kind of got squeezed out, money-wise. But I mean, this is a fantastic signing. I mean, this is absolutely a plug-and-play starter who is going to be, significant. I think if he were signed as a free agent, he would have been, celebrated as the top free agent signing. This quietly adding him doesn't give him, I think, the credit that the organization should get in terms of, this is not somebody who is a lottery ticket. I think what they have signed is a starter and potentially a star.
I saw on social media yesterday after the signing concern from Argos fans because they wondered why, right? Because it's like you're saying, it's such a big signing. People are like, well, wait a second, what happened? And I think that was the immediate reaction. Like, is Ceresna going to be out for a lot longer than people expected? That was the first thing people thought. And then also on the injury report yesterday, Jordan Williams showed up with an ankle injury that he didn't have the day before when he was able to practice full. And so that was the speculation. Is this maybe a serious ankle injury? And I don't know the answer to those questions. I don't know the status of Jordan Williams' ankle. I don't know if that's serious or not. I didn't think it was based on what I was exposed to, but I really don't know. And Ceresna has been practicing in a limited capacity. I'm not led to believe that is going to be anything long term either. But if it's one of the two, I would say this could possibly be a reaction to the Jordan Williams thing, but to flip that around in 24 hours is pretty quick. So I think it's more likely this is something that they've been eyeing for a while now. And
yeah, and I think exactly that. Like, we looked at some of the bigger ticket, players that they have released and wondered, is this to free up money to make a bigger signing later in the season? And to me, this makes sense if they were, whether you're looking at some of the guys that they let go who had bigger ticket contracts who were still useful. I think I would connect this signing more to that than an injury.
He had one of the most epic entrances to practice yesterday. I thought it was spectacular. So I guess he probably came right from signing his contract, and this SUV, like, practice had begun, and this SUV pulls into Lamport Stadium and like drives right in through the gates, like into the end zone, and out hops this football player. And I'm looking over and I'm like, 93, but that's Benoit Marion's number, but clearly it was not Benoit Marion. And then right at that moment, I got the notification that Woody Barron had signed, and I got out my binoculars. I look and I'm like, yeah, that is Woody Barron. And he's getting out of his SUV. He's still got his sneakers on, and so he gets his cleats from the back and goes in and joins the stretching. And yeah, it was a pretty epic entrance, but it's also indicative of somebody that's like, let's get to work right away. Like somebody that clearly just came from getting all his gear and signing his contract to, yeah, let's not miss a minute of practice. Let's get right to work. So I thought that was a pretty positive sign.
For sure. And when you watch, I mean, he's only 30 years old. So I mean, this is a really good signing. And when you watch his film, and I'm sure centers in the East are not very happy because his swim move and his quickness are a huge problem. I mean, and so if you can get the guys back healthy on the edge, and now you have a guy who can eat centers up, or force double teams on the inside, or he is coming up the middle. That's an incredible wrinkle to add to Toronto's pretty formidable edge attack.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a pretty nice, and yeah, this is D-line that's already gone above and beyond. And I think now they maybe increase that. Like that's as good as the defense has been, and this is so I think basically what you're saying is that they've been amazing at stopping the run, no matter what. Even without some of these pieces, like without Orimolade, without Serezna, they have been shutting down the run. I know it didn't necessarily look like it last week in Montreal on paper, but that was just because of that one long run play from Walter Fletcher that broke free. That was just, it looked like Royce Metier took a bad angle on that and it busted up the middle. But this D-line has been amazing at that. But if this move might result in a little bit more faster quarterback pressure, kind of like what we saw from Toronto in the first week, in week one, when Flo and Serezna were healthy, if that's what they can get back to. And then when you add Serezna and Flo back into this group, that's a pretty sick pass rush package that you can put out there. So that's certainly exciting going forward.
And I think the final word is for him is if you put him into that rotational package, that gives you, then their inside guys are able to stay a little faster, able to put a little pressure on, because they don't have to grind, 25 snaps, stopping the run, which obviously is going to slow you down. If you can rotate him in and rotate through guys that are on the center, that increases the the efficiency of everybody.
You can also rotate in week to week, like not just during the game. And I'm a big fan of that during the game. Like I love when they dress 8 defensive linemen and they can basically rotate them through. But I think week to week, we've seen the Argos do this in the past too, where they're like, we're going to need to stock up on run defenders this week, so we're going to address our big guy. This was something they did with Oakman and Brinkman last season, where one of them was a healthy scratch pretty much every week, and they were able to kind of rotate to suit their needs that week defensively. I think that's something, once these guys start getting healthier, maybe that's a way they go with this, and that's how they use the Woody Barron signing. Chris Jones has been relieved of his duties in Edmonton. Former Argonauts coach, very briefly, we forget his time here recently with the Argonauts, but he went from here right over to that head coaching job into Edmonton, and it has been rough for Chris Jones since then. I still believe Chris Jones to be a good football coach. I really do believe that. I know obviously Edmonton's had a series of issues, and this year couldn't have gone worse for the Elks. I just wrote a piece for 3 Down Nation that you could check out, looking at the last 34 seconds of the Chris Jones era. And in that 34 seconds, there was catastrophic failure after catastrophic failure as they let yet another game slip through their fingers. And that's just been indicative of how his time in Edmonton has gone. And I don't think it's all on his shoulders, but at the end of the day, he's the boss. He's the general manager and head coach. And so another 0-5 start, I completely understand. I feel that Edmonton probably should have done that a week before, so they could have made the move in the bye week instead of on a short week where they're playing tomorrow in Ottawa. A short week on the road, replacing your head coach, is not the best time to do it. But clearly they were fed up with this. But I feel for Jones, because I think he got some really bad breaks, and I think the CFL is a better league with Chris Jones in it. I think he adds a lot, not just on the field. I think the personality that he comes with too, I think, is good for the CFL. So I hope he's not gone long, but I completely understand the move that Edmonton made here.
it could very well be, and I don't, I mean, I never take it as a criticism. Some coordinators are coaches and some coordinators are coordinators, and it could very well be that Chris Jones is a very good defensive coordinator, and runs that side of the ball and knows that world, and is not somebody who's cut out for running the whole team, which is a different skill set. I thought Edmonton, what was frustrating, I'm sure, for the owners of Edmonton was that the team just was not getting better. They just were. It didn't seem like there was any progression in terms of the talent being chosen. It didn't seem like a young nucleus was being built. They brought in some quarterback stability this year, and they still can't quite get it together. So I mean, I think his firing, is very, is clearly justifiable. That was they were just not a very good team, and were not getting better at any point under his reign. So I think that's a tough break for him and for Edmonton. But I do think what we'll see a little later in our picks. I think it gives Edmonton the chance to try and turn things around.
And he has had success as a head coach. Like he's won 2 Grey Cups or was it just, no, it was just the 1 Grey Cup as a head coach, right? But he had that really successful run in Saskatchewan as well. There was also problems and he left everything on fire, but he did well in Edmonton. He's had some, but he does seem to leave fires on occasion.
Just never seemed to work in Edmonton. I just couldn't understand what he was building. Didn't really make any sense. I didn't understand his quarterback choices, and and his in-game management was not great.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know exactly why this all went south, but I think sometimes you can have too many responsibilities too. I'm not a huge fan of the general manager head coach combination. I don't think that that's a good way to go. It's too many. Like, general manager is a full-time job. It is more than a full-time job. That consumes your day and night and every waking minute of your time if you're doing your job properly. And so does head coach. The hours are just, they're too much.
Especially. Yeah, and especially if you're rebuilding. Like, for example, like if you have a team like, like if you're Winnipeg and you're pretty set at most positions, you could get away with it because you're not looking to, you might be making a few adjustments, but you're not rebuilding. And to be a rebuilding GM is exactly as you said, it's such an incredible hard job to be looking for the talent. How could you possibly also then be worried about rebuilding the on-field product, right? It's way too much to do in a rebuilding scenario.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Let's move on to talking about the hero of the week, Winon McManis, graded as the top PFF player from this past week in the CFL, with an outstanding score of 90.6. There were a few players that graded very high. Kadeem Carey was the top running back of the week with 82.6. Jordan Williams on the defensive line, 83.3. And Teodric Hansen as a special teamer, 90.6. Man, I love watching Teodric Hansen. Again, this is sort of off the topic here, but I want you to try and do this next time you are at a game in person. It's really hard to do on the TV broadcast, but when you're at a game in person on kickoff, watch Teodric Hansen on that unit. You will see a very large man fly down the field with absolutely no fear, no hesitation. He doesn't break down his feet or anything like that. He's just a missile, a gigantic missile coming right at you. And sometimes he connects, but even when he doesn't, he reroutes returners. And he's someone that opposing teams have to scheme for special teams wise. He had a huge special teams score, but yeah, he's a menace out there, and he's getting a lot of reps on the D line as well. His play he's very quietly, I think, been a real highlight for the Toronto Argonauts this season. So yeah, nice to see him recognized in this week's team as well. So well done to all those guys. But let's highlight Winon McManis's play. He has been by far the best Toronto Argonaut over the last 2 weeks. He looked so determined to drag his team to a win in Saskatchewan, wasn't able to get it done, but his leadership and the intensity of his play over the last couple of weeks has been astonishing to me. He is just hell-bent on getting that team a victory, and it's so tough to do from a linebacker spot. You can't be the difference maker that you can be as a quarterback, for example. But for him to shine as brightly as he has the last 2 weeks really shows the quality of player we're looking at in Winon McManis.
Yeah, he is the heart of that team. He has been since he was signed. He was the best signing they made. He changed that organization. He is the MVP to my mind over the last couple of years. He is the most important player that they needed to bring back. And I think it shows that, when there were buses of Argos heading to other cities, Winon McManis was not going to be allowed to leave town. He's incredible. Like he should be celebrated as the leader of that team, because he definitely is. He is, he is a superb football player, but he is also like the essence of the Argos. And when you have that lets you build a championship team around it. Teams can be lost for years not having a player whose identity, is the team, and Winon McManis is the Toronto Argos, and that allows them to build around that identity. I can't, stress how important that is to have a player who is the identity of your team. I would make him. If I were to choose who is most responsible for the turnaround for the Argos, like on field, it is him.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. He has been. This is in my mind, this is the best we've seen him play, and he's been spectacular in every season in Toronto. And for him to be peaking right now, shows you how special it is that he is a Toronto Argonaut. Let's get into Pick 6, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Pick 6 is our weekly contest where we ask you for your questions, and if we choose your question to answer on this podcast, you win a 6-pack of beer from Something in the Water. And so this week's winner is Gary McConnell, who has just won himself a 6-pack from Something in the Water Brewing for his question that I know a lot of people have, and I've been asked this many times. The answer is really confusing, and I've done my best to boil it down. So let me get into this. Gary's question is, could you clarify the meaning of the designated national, designated American, and nationalized American as it applies to in-game ratio? All right. I reached out to JC Abbott, my colleague at 3 Down Nation, because he is much smarter than I am. And we sat down together and went through the most simple way to boil this down, because the problem with these terms is that it is filled with sort of legalese. Like the language is not simple. We're talking about those 3 different player designations. All 3 have the word designated in it. 2 of them have got the word American in it. And it's so convoluted and confusing because it's an agreement. This is negotiated between the players union and the owners, and so because of that, the wording is very complex, but it makes it a nightmare for fans trying to look at this and figure this out. So let me give you my clearest explanation. Now, this is not going to cover every single detail in every situation and scenario. There's a bunch of little asterisks that I'm just going to ignore here. But for what you as a fan need to know, you are not a general manager putting everyone out on the field. And so you don't need to know all of that stuff and how that will work. But I'm going to give you the basics here. So first of all, you've got a 45-man roster. You can dress 44, but you got a 45-man game day roster. And this is how that is going to break down. You're going to have a minimum of 21 Canadians that are called nationals. It would be easier if they just called it Canadians, but they call it nationals. So 21 nationals. You're going to have 1 global player. You can have more, but we're going to have 1 global player. And you're going to have a maximum of 19 Americans that don't include quarterbacks. And then you're going to have 3 quarterbacks. All right. So 21 Canadians, one global player, 19 Americans, 3 quarterbacks. That takes you to 44, and then your 5th can be another Canadian or another global player, however you want to work that. So that's how the roster is constructed. Now, the term designated American, I just want to throw that away. That doesn't. I'm going to put a visual up here for those of you that I know it's the minority of you, but for those that are watching on YouTube, you can get a bit of a visual aid here because I'm going to put up last week's depth chart just so you can kind of apply this as I talk about this. So designated American really doesn't matter. It's basically any American, because of the ratio numbers, any American that's not starting is a designated American. So it's just not a term you actually really need to know. So let's ignore designated American. The two important terms, designated national and designated nationalized American. So a designated national is a Canadian player that you are going to pick out that can be replaced for a certain number of snaps by a designated nationalized American. So last week, Richie Sindani, Dan Adebaboye, and Albert Awashe were all noted as designated nationals. So they were players who could be substituted for by not necessarily another Canadian, but by a designated nationalized American. The Argos only had one last week. They had because they had nobody that qualified. So they designated on defense. They only had one person that qualified on offense. And so this is a player that is not on the field for the first snap, but they are someone that has either been with the team for 3 years or been in the league for 5 years. And they can come on the field and take snaps for Canadian players as well as Americans. Now, they can be on the field for Americans for as many snaps as you like, but they can only replace a designated national, a Canadian, for a maximum of 25 snaps. And that's where it gets really tough. And I know that if you were watching the Red Blacks Ticats game a few weeks ago on the broadcast, it got really confusing because the broadcast had reported, hey, we've just learned that Tim White, who was listed as the designated nationalized American for that game, Tim White only had 3 snaps remaining. And so suddenly everyone was like on red alert saying, well, does that mean Tim White can only be on the field for 3 more snaps in this game? And then we all watched as he was on the field for many more than that. And that's because he could only be on the field for 3 more snaps for that designated national. But he could be on the field for the rest of the whole game if they wanted to, as long as those other snaps were with him replacing another American player. So that's the simplified version. I know it still sounds complex, but basically those are the only 2 pieces you need to remember. Your designated nationalized American is a player that isn't going to be on the field for the first snap necessarily, but they can then take off your designated national for a maximum of 25 snaps. It's a way of coaches, GMs getting American players on the field for a little bit more. All right, JB. Hopefully that question from Gary was answered well enough.
Oh my God.
I know it's so like you should like the conversation that JC Abbott and I had when we were trying to break it down. In the middle of the conversation, I got so confused that I started losing track of what was happening because it just sounds like you're dealing with a legal document, and that's because you are. This was not a rule that was made for fans. This was a rule that is made to appease both the players' union and the owners. And so this is why it's so complicated. But yeah, that's the shortest version of this I can possibly give you. If you want to read more about this, you can go to cfl.ca/game-rule-ratio. They've got a full write-up for you. It's really confusing, but if you want some more information, you can find it there. That's cfl.ca/game-rule-ratio. Okay, JB, let's get into this one. A game preview for the Hamilton Tiger Cats and Toronto Argonauts. I'm one of those people that say you can pretty much throw everything out the window when these two teams play. It doesn't matter how bad or good either of these teams are. When they get together, you never know what's going to happen. The Toronto Argonauts on paper are clearly a better football team, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to roll away with this one, especially because there's the added incentive for a lot of those Ticat players who are former Argonauts. We've got Jamal Peters on defense, Trevor Hoyt on defense. You've got 4 defensive linemen in Brandon Barlow, Benoit Marion, Dwayne Hendricks, and Deontay Knight. This is a roster stacked with former Argos defensive players, and we know how good that Toronto Argonauts defense was last year. JB, how do you look at this one? Is this a dangerous, like, red alert game going into play the 0-5 Hamilton Tiger Cats at Tim Hortons Field?
Yeah, I don't think any game. I don't think the Argos are a good enough team to take anybody lightly. I think the Argos have talent and have shown that this year, but I can't imagine that they are overlooking any team because that's not really, unlike last year where maybe you might. I think the Hamilton game is going to be really difficult because a win for Hamilton has a magical effect of almost redeeming all of those winless games that they've played already. And so they basically get like a fan reset if you beat Toronto at home. So that's incredibly motivating for Hamilton to kind of be able to reconnect with their fans if they're able to take care of business.
And the mood in Hamilton isn't good. I was in the stands for Hamilton's last game, Hamilton, BC. My daughter was playing with her flag football team in the pregame time, and so I just sat in the stands as a spectator, and I couldn't believe the level of negativity around me. I guess this shouldn't surprise me, but we were just a few minutes into the game and everybody is like chanting for changes at quarterback, chanting for firings, and that's not the Hamilton Tiger Cats fan base that I'm familiar with. They're behind their Cats like all the time. Like that's a very passionate fan base, and I just couldn't believe how fast they. Now, it didn't help that it was 14-0 by the time I got to my seat. I guess maybe that was part of the problem, but they were really quick to turn. And so, if this game gets out of hand early, if Toronto can put up points early, those Hamilton supporters who can be such an asset to the Hamilton team, who can get that team fired up like nobody else, they will turn, because I've seen it, and they'll do that again this coming week. And so that's got to be Toronto's goal in this, is put points up early. If you can score a quick 6, then the wheels could very well fall off for the Tiger Cats, because they will lose that. They will lose their fans almost immediately, based on my experience from a week ago. Let's take a look at the injury report for these two teams coming in. Hamilton's not too bad off right now. They do have a bunch of people on the injury report. None that are really going to stand out. They've got they do have a bunch of guys that are out long term who are on the 6 game, just like the Argos do. There's some big problems there. But in terms of guys who were looking to play this week, there aren't a lot of difference makers. So nothing particularly stands out to me. I think you're going to essentially get that crew that we saw last week in their last game out, with maybe a little bit more health and a little bit more, maybe a little bit more cohesiveness on the defensive unit. But yeah, nothing that stands out to me. Toronto, meanwhile, they do have some questions. So I want you to ignore some of the guys that are a week away from coming off the 6-game injury list. So guys like Tunde Adeleke, guys like Kevin Mittal, Dave Ungerer, Dylan Giffen. These guys have been practicing, but they're not ready to come back yet. Flo Remalade has been limited. He's still a couple weeks away at earliest, I think, from coming back. The questions here are going to be, you've got Jake Ceresna, who has been limited all week. He's got that shoulder injury that he sustained in Saskatchewan. I thought he might have had a chance to play last week if the game weren't a Thursday nighter, but the fact that he's still limited this week tells me this is maybe more serious than I had initially thought it to be. So at this stage, I would be surprised to see Jake Ceresna out there. It's possible, but I don't expect it. And then Jonathan Edwards suddenly showed up as limited with a foot Wednesday. I think that needs to be monitored as well. They've got some answers there at corner, but not a ton. So I think that's definitely worth watching. And then for the rest of the injury report, it's nothing that's really going to jump out. Everyone's still going to need time on the 6 game. There aren't a lot of day-to-days that you're really concerned with. So I think you're going to have to take a look on defense at Jake Ceresna, at Jonathan Edward going forward, to see how those two guys respond if they are able to practice today, if they're able to go through walkthrough tomorrow. I think that will be what to watch. And then the one that we talked about off the top of the show, Jordan Williams, who didn't practice with that ankle injury yesterday. If he's a do not practice today, then I think he's probably out for this week, in which case I think you're going to see Woody Barron plugged in, ready to go in Hammertown this weekend. It is time for OCDC. For OCDC, we will start with the hometown Hamilton Tiger Cats. I will be the offensive coordinator for Hamilton. JB, you will be the defensive coordinator for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Starting it off on offense, this is the number one thing for me. I know Hamilton's got a great running back in Butler, and that's been a not really reliable, but somewhat reliable element of their attack. And so far this season, I would completely throw that out the window. If I'm the offensive coordinator for Hamilton, I don't even try to run the football this week. Toronto has shown they have shown that they can stop anyone on the ground this season. I would not even bother. I think you're just wasting it down. I felt that with Saskatchewan a couple of weeks ago, and they took the hint too. A few plays in, they're like, we're not going to run the football anymore because there's just no point. You are wasting. It's going to be 2nd and 9, at best 2nd and 8. What's the point? And so throw that out. Bo Levi Mitchell has been playing pretty good football for the most part this year. I actually like what I've seen from him this season, and I was a doubter coming in. I didn't think I was going to see anything like this from Bo Levi Mitchell. He has not been the problem in Hamilton. So I'm fully comfortable putting this on Bo's shoulders. He's felt that before, and so I go right into an aerial attack. And I go deep downfield. I think this is a game of taking shots. You're looking for Tim White, but you're going to spread that ball around and look for your burners downfield, really challenge the Toronto corners. I would use a lot of late motion too to see if you can isolate Tim White on the corner of your choosing and really attack and go again and again and again downfield. You're going to connect with a couple. You're going to get a couple PI calls as well. I think that is solely the way to go. It can't just be every play. Obviously, you have to run a script. But I think for the most part, the key to this game is going to be downfield shots, trying to pick on Toronto's cornerbacks, because there's been some questionable play there, as has been documented on this program. JB, what is your defensive plan for the Hamilton Tiger Cats?
Well, I think trying to stop Toronto begins and ends with stopping the run. I think they have to load up on the box. I think that you have to stop the run, and you can live with giving up some deep coverage, and you can live with not necessarily being in zero, but I think you can live with being having an extra lineman, sending your linebackers in run blitz, making sure that you're taking away the passes to the running back. That's where my focus is. I'm not gonna let the running back catch the ball. I'm not gonna let the running back run the ball, and then I'm gonna see what happens from there. I just think that's the focus. You have to bring that, and then you just have to get away with some man coverage. You can mix in some zone, but you're gonna have to live with your DBs being on islands, and I still think that's the way to beat Toronto.
Yeah, easier said than done, like you're saying, but I agree. We've yet to really see a team do it and be able to take away the run, but we've seen teams slow them enough where if they can also put up points, Toronto's forced to be in a position where they have to turn to the pass. Let's switch to the good guys, JB. I will go first with Toronto's offense. Hamilton has been so far defensively a bit of a get-right game for the opposition, and I think Toronto's going to be looking to get their passing game back together. The way that Toronto looked against the Edmonton Elks in Week 3 of this season is, I think, what potentially faces them in terms of possibilities this week in Hamilton. That defensive backfield from Hamilton was lost against the BC Lions. They were absolutely lost. They're not getting the same level of play from Stavros Katsantonis that I think they had hoped they would be getting when they allowed Tunde Adeleke to move on. Like, Katsantonis looked great last season. He was one of the best safeties in the league. He has not looked the same so far this year. I know he's a little bit banged up. He took a heck of a shot last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, against BC, running into concrete in the end zone. It just didn't look good at all for him. And I don't know what his health has been like all season, but he hasn't been the same guy. Jonathan Moxey, who I really like as a corner, has struggled from the Sam linebacker position. We'll see how Hamilton handles that this week. I think that those are areas that they can exploit. BC crushed Moxie all first half, and 3 of their 4 first half touchdowns had something to do with Moxie in coverage. And so I think if I'm Toronto, I'm going to try and do that same thing. I'm really going to try and exploit the middle of the field, especially to the Sam linebacker side, and see if you can catch Hamilton in unfavorable matchups. They've done a lot of strange things defensively. Just looking at some of their schemes, they have had really unusual zone coverages where they leave a ton of responsibility for their strong side linebacker, and that's where Moxie got burned a lot. So I think you try and take advantage of that. You try and take advantage of Katsantonis, who just doesn't look on the right page. And so that's how you attack the middle of the field. And then I think also late motion seems to be causing a lot of problems for the Hamilton secondary. I talked about that as being a strategy Hamilton can employ against Toronto. Same thing on the other side of the ball. A couple of the busts that BC saw against Hamilton resulted from guys coming off late. JB, you've talked about how difficult it is when you arrange like spike releases where one guy is releasing as another guy crosses underneath him. That worked really well for BC against Hamilton. I want to see more of that, where on their waggle, on their run-up, you've got receivers crossing, you've got guys switching sides last minute. You've also got your running backs leaking out of the backfield. I think that's going to be huge for Toronto this week. Force them to put Wilson in coverage on your linebacker or Hoyt or Moxie, whoever's out there. Force them out on those running backs and give them dual responsibility where they're looking to not only stop the run, but suddenly have to fan out quickly in pass coverage. I think that's how I would attack this Hamilton defense. Of course, you don't shy away from running the football. I think you can assert that run game early and really establish something, but I want to attack the middle of the field through the pass, and I want to have a lot of motion. I'll force the Hamilton defense to communicate because it's something they've struggled with so far this season. JB, what's your plan defensively for the Toronto Argonauts? How do they shut down Bo Levi Mitchell and the Ticats?
Yeah, I mean Hamilton's a weird team. Like statistically, they're low when it comes to scoring, but they're quite high in net offense. They're high on first downs achieved through the air. They've been pretty good at preventing sacks. Like statistically, this team should be 3-3 because they are in the top part of most offensive categories except for being able to score and being able to run. Those seem to be the 2 primary areas Hamilton's having issues. So for me, I'm going to try and put the load on my guys again defensively. I'm going to take a defensive lineman off the field and bring on another defensive back, and hope that essentially I can keep the run in check, and take away the pass. I want to take away the pass against Hamilton. They need to score big, deep passes like you're talking about. I want to take that away. I want to take away the deep pass. I want to let them have to try and work their way downfield with the passes. And then once we get in the red zone, that's when I'm going to start bringing in, I bring back a box player, and that's where we're going to bring more heat. Not necessarily that we're going to get sacks, but they really have shown that they're, a little bit like the Argos sometimes, that the red zone is a little bit in their head. They're not very confident down there. They do not have a great completion percentage in the red zone. And for me, that suggests, bring some, more interesting blitzes, try and really kind of pressure them when we're down in that area. But the rest of the time, I'm just going to let them try and throw it to me deep, and hope that I can keep the check-in run with a lighter box.
One thing has been very hit and miss for us this season, but recently we seem to be on the right page. Certainly when the Argos win, it seems like our one thing has been there. In the losses, they have not. So maybe that is on point with what this segment is supposed to be. For one thing this week, I'm looking for 3 touchdown passes from Cameron Dukes. I know that's a lot, but to me, this is going to look like that week 3 matchup against the Edmonton Elks, where there are going to be opportunities downfield. Remember in that Elks game, you had touchdown passes to DeMonte Coxie of 36 yards, to Rasheed Bailey, 21 yards. There are going to be openings downfield. And so I want to see Cameron Dukes just launch it because you know that Hamilton's going to be uptight. They're going to be in the box. They're going to leave some vulnerability downfield. So my one thing is Cameron Duke's basically going after, and it doesn't have to end up being 3 touchdown passes. That's what I'm asking for. But basically the message from that is that it's bombs away downfield because that's where the opportunities are going to be. And I really think that will serve him well going forward, where it will warn teams that you can't simply stack the box, because if you do, you might get burned over top. So that's my one thing this week. JB, what is yours?
Going with my kind of 6 DB strategy, I want no passes over 30 yards. No deep passes allowed by Toronto.
And so you have that deep umbrella, keep everything in front of you. Is this a bend but don't break week then for you that way?
Yeah, I guess so. Like what it boils down to is I think that you can mix in pressures, right? You don't have to spend the whole time in the umbrella. But I would say that I'm definitely switching to that kind of deeper coverage and forcing Hamilton to go 12, 13, 14 plays.
How does this one end, JB? What is your final score? Who wins?
I like the Argos. I know Hamilton is going to give everything to win this game. I think they're coming off the bye, which is a big advantage. I think this is a very challenge. This is not an 0-5 team. I would feel much more confident if we were heading to Ottawa. But I have Toronto coming out on top 35-32.
Yeah, like you're saying, the team I was on Yes Guy with Jim Taddy this morning, and I was talking about having to bail out my basement over the last 48 hours, where we've seen so much flooding in the city of Toronto over the last week. And I said I spent so much time in the basement, I feel like a Hamilton Tiger Cat. And as much as I joke about the Tiger Cats and their 0-5 record, or the Elks and their 0-5 record, there's so much parity in the league this year. The Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Edmonton Elks, these are not your typical 0-5 teams. They're good football teams. They have found a way to lose every week. Tim White, who I think is one of their best, if not their best player, was not single-handedly responsible, but his drops cost them 2 games alone. And I don't want to put that all on his shoulders. I don't think that's fair, because it takes a whole team to win or lose a football game. But yeah, Hamilton should be at least a 2-win team, and really could be a 3-win team. So this isn't necessarily going to be easy. And yet I think Toronto is better, and I think if they can get up early, they're going to be able to pull away with it a little bit. So I think the Argos win, but I could see this game going any direction. Nothing would surprise me when you get these two teams together. For my prediction, I'm going to say Argos 31, Ticats 20. But again, I wouldn't be surprised with just about any number you could throw at me. All right, JB, it's time for Put Me Down for 20, the segment that after last week, you may no longer be dreading, JB. You are back in the black. I am still in the black. And despite that, I want to tell you, listeners, please do not take any of our betting advice seriously. We are betting fictional golden fleeces. We would not risk our own money on our advice, and so neither should you. So take all of our picks with a grain of salt and only bet what you can afford to lose as a cost of entertainment if you choose to do so. So huge week for you, JB, last week. You hit on Toronto on the money line at plus 250, and you hit a parlay, which may be a X's and Argos first, where you had BC minus 6.5 and the over as well. And so that was plus 240. So yeah, massive week for you. You were back up. You were at 204 now, Golden Fleeces. I split, but the one I hit was Coxie getting a touchdown at plus 220, which I thought was a very big number considering how he's played in Montreal. And so I move up a little bit. I'm at 226.5 Golden Fleeces for this week. JB, you're rolling in fleeces. Where are you spending them this week?
I feel really great about these picks too. I've got my first 10 with Devaris Daniels anytime touchdown at plus 190.
Plus 190, okay.
And because he just eats them.
I know he does.
And look, I know no one's calling for it, but Edmonton, I think they're going to go into Ottawa. I think they're going to get new coach bounce. I've got Edmonton winning by 1 to 6 points, plus 360.
And you have yet to win. You've made last year. You made about 10 of these bets, margin of victory bets, and they're always really tempting odds. Could this be the week that you break your streak? This is the time to roll the dice, JB, because you're on
I
fire
feel
right
the
now.
Edmonton last second field goal. I feel it in my bones.
Fortunately, they've never let you down before.
So well, they came through for me last week.
It's true.
I knew I could count on them to throw it all away.
For my golden fleeces, I'm gonna put. I'm kind of grinding out this week. I don't have any exciting risky plays. I've got Toronto -3 in Hamilton. I just think that's a really low point spread. I actually saw it get down to 2.5, but then when I checked this morning, it was at 3. So Toronto -3 at -110 for 10 of my golden fleeces. And my other 10 golden fleeces, I'm going to take Saskatchewan +4 against Winnipeg for -110. I just think that's a game that gets decided by a field goal, or Saskatchewan runs away with it because of turnovers. I don't see that as being a game that Winnipeg wins by more than a field goal. So I like that pick for myself this week. Let's get into our CFL picks. And again, you had a huge week last week. You have dug yourself out of a massive hole, JB. You were 4-0 last week and now have a 14-10 record. I was 2-2 last week, and so after my hot start, I've cooled down a little bit. I'm 17-7. Let's go into this week. I'm going to give you honors this week with that 4-0 showing last week. So Edmonton at Ottawa, will you be picking your Elks?
I will. Now, I will say off the top, I'm on my yearly rant. I do not, for the life of me, understand why the CFL does not have a game on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. It is the sport drought. There is no professional sporting happening in North America on Wednesday and Thursday night. I don't know why there is not CFL football on Wednesday or Thursday night. And I will rant about it every year, and there it is.
Just to add to that
Elks.
too, just sorry, before you get to that, we probably should have made this a conversation topic. We've talked about it enough, and probably our listeners are sick of this conversation, so I guess that's why we didn't. But yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I recognize Wednesday's a terrible day to try and schedule any kind of sporting event, but you got to find a way, have it be a team coming off a bye, playing a team that played a Thursday game last week, so they got 6 days prep. You've got to find a way to put it in there because everyone will be watching. Last night, you had basically all of America and half of Canada watching Caitlin Clark and the WNBA because they had a game. They very cleverly scheduled a primetime event for that. That makes sense. And so you've got millions of people watching the WNBA. That's a really smart move. And so the CFL, for now the 10th year in a row that we've been yelling this, fix this next year. Make a Wednesday and Thursday game.
Even if you don't play on the Wednesday, how do we not have a Thursday night game this week?
For the first time this year, too. It's like they went out of their way to be like, oh, yeah, you want us to have a game during All-Star Week? No, we're going to double-header it up Friday when baseball's back. Yeah.
Anyway, okay. No, so I like my Edmonton.
You like
Edmonton to beat Ottawa.
All right, Winnipeg. Sorry, I got to give my pick. So I'm also taking Edmonton. I just think they're a better team. I've taken Edmonton a few times this year because they're good. They're a good football team for 59 minutes. They can beat anybody for 59 minutes. They can't beat anybody in 60 though. And maybe this is the week. Just that new coach bump, something like that. Ottawa does not look good to me. I no reason why Edmonton can't go into Ottawa and win this game. And I feel like since the pandemic, Edmonton's been better on the road than they have at home anyway. So I don't think that's a difference maker. Edmonton wins this game. Winnipeg at Saskatchewan. Where are you going with this one, JB?
Yeah, I think this is the game of the weekend.
Yeah.
Winnipeg is definitely waking up, and they have ground to make up. Saskatchewan got, as we thought they would, rocked a bit by BC. I think Saskatchewan bounces back at home. I got Saskatchewan over Winnipeg.
Yeah, and I've done the same. I think they win this game. They're so good. I look at their run defense numbers. You look at how well they've handled teams against the run. Even Toronto, they didn't shut them out the way that they did with other teams, but it made it really tough for the Argos, who are an excellent running team. And Winnipeg, like, that's really their strength. I know Ontario Wilson last week went off and Zach Collaros seemed to bring it back, but they've got good players in the secondary. Wilson's going to have a lot more trouble against guys like Milligan and Sales than he had this past week. So I'm looking for a really big defensive game from the Rough Riders, and I think they keep it close and then have a chance to win at the end. So I think it's more exciting to pick the upset. I'm picking the Rough Riders. Toronto at Hamilton. I've already said I've got Toronto for this, and unlike you, I don't hedge. Are you hedging and taking the Ticats, or you feel confident?
No, if I were to hedge, I would have taken Ottawa on the hedge. I thought about taking Ottawa on the hedge, but I feel like I'm in a position of authority now, so I don't need to play those games.
So you were taking Toronto over Hamilton?
I am taking Toronto over Hamilton.
BC at Calgary for the last one. Is there any chance that Calgary can upset BC, who are currently playing like the best team in the league? They are sort of the new Montreal right now.
Yeah, I do think so. I think that this is a really important game for Calgary. I think Calgary is good at home, and this is really a chance for them to get back into the conversation, or to stay in the conversation for division leader, to keep pace with BC. I think it's a really important Calgary game. I thought they played really well against Winnipeg. I like Calgary at home to beat BC.
I love that pick. I can't do it myself. I'm going to take BC. I love that. I love the confidence of your pick, and I wish I had that in Calgary. I haven't seen enough from their quarterback play. I know, like, Mayer played better last week than he did in Montreal. Certainly, everyone plays better against anyone than they do against Montreal, I guess. But BC is so hot right now. Everything they do works. Like, since that week 1 loss to Toronto, and even then they played okay, but they have been on fire, and they took apart a really good Saskatchewan team last week. I know it's on the road. I know Calgary's a tough place to play. I got to see someone beat BC before I'm going to pick against them, though. So I've got the BC Lions, and that is our only difference this week. Well, that will just about do it for us on the X's and Argos podcast, this pregame walkthrough edition brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. It's going to be a good one. In Hamilton, Saturday night, the Argos and Hamilton Tiger Cats, 7 p.m. You can catch the game on TSN 1050 if you want to hear Mike Hogan and I on the broadcast. You can sync it with your television, or you can just listen to us if you're in the car, on the road, moving around, doing whatever you do. Please catch the game on TSN 1050. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.